In her 1993 review of the book Sexuality and the Curriculum, gender studies academic Debbie Epstein wrote, "Post-structuralist and postmodern critiques of categorical binary divisions between, for example, male-female, straight-gay, are important in understanding the complex ways in which we all make sense of our lives, including our relationships to sexuality. We certainly need to apply some of these complex understandings to education in general, and sexuality education in particular. If we are to be successful in developing effective anti-oppressive curricula, it is also important that we start applying some of the postmodern, and particularly feminist postmodern, appropriations of psychoanalytic theory to issues of sexuality in the curriculum, since these have the potential to help us understand the psychic investments which people have in maintaining both difference and inequality." Included in the definition of postmodernism in the Encyclopaedia Britannica is the following. Postmodernism in Western philosophy, a late 20th century movement characterized by broad skepticism, subjectivism, or relativism, a general suspicion of reason, and an acute sensitivity to the role of ideology in asserting and maintaining political and economic power. Postmodernism is largely a reaction against the intellectual assumptions and values of the modern period in the history of Western philosophy. Indeed, many of the doctrines characteristically associated with postmodernism can fairly be described as a straightforward denial of general philosophical viewpoints that were taken for granted during the 18th century Enlightenment, though they were not unique to that period. The most important of these viewpoints are the following. Number one, there is an objective natural reality, a reality whose existence and properties are logically independent of human beings, of their minds, their societies, their social practices, or their investigative techniques. Postmodernists dismiss this idea as a kind of naive realism. Number two, the descriptive and explanatory statements of scientists and historians can, in principle, be objectively true or false. The postmodern denial of this viewpoint, which follows from the rejection of an objective natural reality, is sometimes expressed by saying that there is no such thing as truth. Number three, through the use of reason and logic, and with the more specialized tools provided by science and technology, human beings are likely to change themselves and their societies for the better. Postmodernists deny this Enlightenment faith in science and technology as instruments of human progress. Number four, reason and logic are universally valid, i.e. their laws are the same for or apply equally to any thinker and any domain of knowledge. For postmodernists, reason and logic too are merely conceptual constructs and are therefore valid only within the established intellectual traditions in which they are used. Number five, there is such a thing as human nature. It consists of faculties, aptitudes, or dispositions that are in some sense present in human beings at birth, rather than learned or instilled through social forces. Postmodernists insist that all, or nearly all, aspects of human psychology are completely socially determined. Number six, language refers to and represents a reality outside itself. According to postmodernists, language is not such a mirror of nature as the American pragmatist philosopher Richard Rorty characterized the Enlightenment view. Inspired by the work of the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, postmodernists claim that language is semantically self-contained or self-referential. The meaning of a word is not a static thing in the world or even an idea in the mind, but rather a range of contrasts and differences with the meanings of other words. Number seven, human beings can acquire knowledge about natural reality, and this knowledge can be justified ultimately on the basis of evidence or principles that are or can be known immediately, intuitively, or otherwise with certainty. Postmodernists reject this sort of philosophical foundationalism. As indicated in the preceding section, many of the characteristic doctrines of postmodernism constitute or imply some form of metaphysical, epistemological, or ethical relativism. Postmodernists deny that there are aspects of reality that are objective, that there are statements about reality that are objectively true or false, that it is possible to have knowledge of such statements, that it is possible for human beings to know some things with certainty, and that there are objective or absolute moral values. These are the ideas that have infused the mindset of many of those who have influenced Welsh Government policy, including educational policy. Professor Emma Renold from Cardiff University School of Social Sciences is the architect of the Welsh Government's RSE code and guidance that underpins the RSE curriculum. Debbie Epstein is one of several very influential academics who are referenced in Professor Emma Renold's 2005 book, Girls, Boys and Junior Sexualities, Exploring Children's Gender and Sexual Relations in the Primary School, in which Professor Emma Renold wrote, "Queer theory is linked to forms of politics which deliberately seek to break down the fixed boundaries between the hetero-homo, gender and other binaries, to multiply sexual categories and ultimately dissolve them." And queering childhood involves not just the queering of sex and gender and sexual binary oppositions, such as male-female and heterosexual-homosexual, but also the generational binaries, adult-child and sexual-asexual. More specifically then, queering childhood pushes us to identify and think otherwise about, and thus trouble, the heterogendered and heterosexualized nature of identity categories such as girl, boy and child. Epstein wrote the foreword to the book that was full of praise. In the acknowledgement section of the book, Renold expresses gratitude to both Debbie Epstein and to Alison Parkin, who proofread the book. In the Gender Equality Review, Dr. Alison Parkin advised the Welsh Government, "Postmodernist feminism's queer and trans theories have argued that on the way to creating a level playing field, the gender binaries should be challenged, disrupted, and the fluidity of gender identities recognised. Queer theorists believe in breaking down barriers between categories by the manipulation of language." Renold also acknowledges the help of Professor Sally Holland.
Hello, I'm Sally Holland. I'm a Professor of Social Work here in the school, and I'm also the Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. I work with our diverse school community to promote a sense of belonging and trust in the school. We work with the Welsh term cynefin, which means a sense of belonging to a place, and we really hope to develop that kind of atmosphere here in the school in all that we do. We also work to identify and try to remove barriers that are associated with things like gender.
From 2015 to 2022, Sally Holland was the Children's Commissioner for Wales. Professor Holland was very supportive of Emma Renold. In her annual report from 2017 to 2018, she wrote, "This year we continue to promote the Agenda resource, produced in collaboration with the NSPCC and Welsh Women's Aid, and led by Professor Emma Renold of Cardiff University. It enables young people to explore gender equality, attitudes to sexualities and stereotyping, using a range of creative methods." And Children and Young People's Views. In 2016, we worked with Cardiff University, NSPCC Cymru and Welsh Women's Aid to create Agenda, a young people's guide to making positive relationships matter. This year, we worked with the same partners to support the development of a primary school version of Agenda. Primary Agenda will showcase case studies highlighting good practice examples of working with under 11-year-olds within education and community groups, promoting healthy relationships and challenging gender inequalities, oppressive gender norms, violence against women, homophobia and transphobia. And progress and recommendation. The government established an expert panel chaired by Professor Renold, and my office was part of this. The panel reported in December 2017 with a framework for rights-based statutory relationships and sexuality education. I recommend that the Welsh Government takes forward the recommendations of their expert panel's report and makes healthy relationships education a statutory part of the new curriculum. Healthy relationships education should be rights-based and informed by learner involvement in the design.
Since Agenda's launch in November 2016, we have embedded it into practice through outreach work in schools and youth groups and practitioner workshops at local, national and international levels. In the first year, Agenda has reached more than 3,000 young people and practitioners, and we've trained more than 40 Agenda youth ambassadors.
But what's important to me about Emma's work is that it draws on children's experiences. She works with children to develop her research and any materials coming out of it. She was selected by Welsh Government to lead an expert panel on sex and relationships education. They came out with a really quite transformative and far-reaching and quite radical set of suggestions last autumn. And our Cabinet Secretary for Education announced that she would be implementing the recommendations in full on a statutory basis in Wales.
And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the expert panel members and its chair, Professor Emma Renold, for their excellent work.
Before becoming Children's Commissioner, Sally Holland co-authored several academic papers with Professor Renold and one with Mark Drakeford. In an article titled Representing Children's Identities in Core Assessments that was co-authored with Jane Thomas from Cafcass Cymru, Holland wrote, "Post-structural theorists such as Butler and Walkerdine emphasise how identities are enacted and produced through discourse rather than forming an essential, interior and stable sense of self. For example, Butler argues that gender exists only through performance and thus is neither a predetermined nor necessarily a binary condition. Walkerdine defines it thus: the human subject is produced in the discursive practices that make up the social world, as opposed to a pre-given psychological subject who is made social or socialized. Sally Holland is a sociologist. She is not a paediatrician. In her report, Dr. Hilary Cass writes, "Changes from adolescence into adulthood. There are two important periods of brain development, the first up to age 3 and the second from adolescence into adulthood. Adolescence is a period of rapid social, emotional, physical and cognitive development that can be difficult for some young people to navigate. Pubertal changes in hormones result in changes to the physical body and the brain, alongside major changes in social expectations and demands. An understanding of brain development and the stages of adolescence is essential to understanding how gender identity relates to the other aspects of adolescence. It is also important to consider in relation to the management of gender incongruence and gender-related distress during this period. Changes in the brain during adolescence. Starting in early puberty, unused neural connections are pruned, and other important connections are made stronger and faster. It used to be thought that brain maturation finished in adolescence, but it is now understood that this remodelling continues into the mid-20s as different parts become more interconnected and specialised. This brain remodelling does not proceed evenly. Changes in the limbic area, which is present-orientated and concerned with risk-taking and sensation-seeking, begin with puberty. This part of the brain becomes supersensitized, drives emotional volatility, pleasure and novelty-seeking, and also makes adolescents more sensitive to social rejection, as well as vulnerable to addiction and a range of mental health problems. The future-oriented prefrontal cortex matures later with development, continuing into an individual's 20s and, as illustrated in Figure 19, is concerned with executive functions such as complex decision-making, rational judgment, inhibition of impulsivity, planning and prioritization. By the age of 15, an adolescent will make similar decisions in relation to hypothetical situations as an adult. However, although adolescents can balance the possible harm or benefit of different courses of action in theory, in the real world they may still engage in dangerous behaviours despite understanding the risks involved. Hence, both the role of emotions and the connection between feeling and thinking are relevant to how adolescents make decisions. The social brain. The social brain is the network of brain regions that are involved in understanding other people's intentions, desires and beliefs. The slowly maturing prefrontal cortex is a key part of this network, so there are considerable changes in these abilities through teens to adulthood. Through adolescence, peers have an increasing influence and parents a lessening influence. Adolescents' evaluation of their social and personal worth is strongly influenced by what their peers think about them. Studies have shown adolescents to be hypersensitive to social isolation, so much so that going along with peers in order to avoid social risk, even if it means taking health and legal risks, might be seen as the rational choice because it reduces the possibility of social exclusion. Professor Holland is involved in setting up peer support groups and safe spaces where young people in the School of Social Sciences who are questioning their gender can have their delusions affirmed.
Examples of some of our activities include setting up peer support groups for students and staff, making sure that everyone has the training that they need in order to identify and understand discrimination.
My name is Emily Hayward. I am a PhD student in the School of Social Sciences, and I'm also a part of the Gender and Sexualities subcommittee. As a queer person and a non-binary person, being part of the School of Social Sciences, before this, I didn't really feel like I had much representation, so it's really important for me to be able to be that representation to other people in the school and really create a kind of equal and safe environment within the School of Social Sciences. It's important for others as well. I think that we've come a really long way in the School of Social Sciences, but I think that there is still a long way to go, and if I can be a part of helping make the school and the university more equal and a safe environment for them, then that is something that I think is really important. So recently I've been a part of something called Cafe Query. It is a postgraduate research group that was set up with me and another student, and we set it up as a safe place for LGBTQ plus students in the School of Social Sciences. It was set up as a safe space. It was also set up as an activist space. So as part of that, we applied for a small grant, and we set up both a seminar series that was trans inclusive and was there to really get academics and students involved in talking about positive things within that kind of subject area. A part of this Cafe Query group, we also set up a creative workshop. This was joint with the Gender and Sexualities research group within School of Social Sciences to create an environment where we could talk about our struggles within both within academia but also within our own work. And by doing this kind of workshop, it meant that we had peer support, it meant that we created networks across different universities across South Wales, and it really created a really fun and joyous environment for things that can often be a topic that's quite negative. Some of the ways that I kind of hope to enact this change is to continue the work with Cafe Query and other students in the school and the university, as well as really jumping into the Gender and Sexuality Committee and overall just listening to what other students and staff, what their experiences are, but also what they would like to see as change, and seeing what we can do with that and see what we can put in place.
During her time as Children's Commissioner, Sally Holland produced a publication titled Challenging the Negative Reporting of the LGBT Community, where she quoted pupils from the Digon group in Ysgol Plasmawr. How can people who are questioning their gender make an informed decision if they can't relate to similar characters in the media? In contrast, Debbie Epstein is fully supportive of those authors who produce material that help children and young people feel comfortable in their body.